And we begin in Hong Kong, where things are escalating today. As you know, for the last 11 weeks, hundreds of thousands of pro-democracy protesters have been in the streets marching for their autonomy, sometimes peaceful, sometimes violent. And our Ian panel is on the ground now with the latest. Ian?
Yeah, hi there, Kimberly. We're at Yuen Long train station. This is about 45 minutes drive outside of central Hong Kong, heading towards the Chinese border. I just want to show you the picture down here. You can see this line of police riot trucks. There are more police now starting to come down the road, finally leaving this tense standoff that we saw here earlier tonight. Very dramatic pictures. This evening, what began as a peaceful sit-in at the station with anything up to 1,000 protesters sat there peacefully, calmly, not interrupting the flow of passengers at the station, then started to escalate. Some of the protesters went down to the corner there where the police are turning and set up a barricade. Now, we believe what might have been going on is that there is a village beyond there that you can't see, which is believed to be home to some thugs, some local gangsters who came to this very same station a month ago today and assaulted 45 of the protesters. Let's head up towards the station itself. So they came here today to commemorate the fact that that had happened. And what began as a peaceful protest then looked very, very ugly and violent, potentially violent at one point. So let's just have a quick look inside there. Unfortunately, there's a lot of noise going on because the fire alarm is still ringing. Let's come inside anyway. You can just forgive the noise a little bit, mind the fire hose. So they basically unraveled this fire hose and sprayed water on the floor over here to your left to basically stop the riot police who are on the other side from coming in. You can see the umbrellas that the police use, debris thrown on the ground to set up a barricade at that point and a barricade at the other point. We'll just move back out just so we can get away from the noise a little bit. So what happened was the riot police started to come in, a few dozen of them. The protesters, again, a couple of dozen or so, were in this tense standoff. They were pointing laser pointers into the eyes of the police. The police, in turn, were threatening to spray ink on the protesters and carry out arrests. The protesters say, look, we're just being peaceful here. There's no reason for this to happen. There's been a key slogan used by the protesters throughout, which is "be like water." This is a phrase that comes from the Kung Fu master, Bruce Lee. And what it essentially means is that you be strong when you come together. When the time comes, you should disappear. And that's exactly what we saw when we arrived here. And look at it now. It's like the scene has completely emptied, nothing to see, traffic returned to normal, the train station will be open, and I guarantee we're going to see more protests tomorrow and in the coming days. Kim?
Thank you, Ian, for the updates. And now we turn to Washington, where President Trump spoke on the White House South Lawn on his way to Louisville today on a number of topics, including gun control legislation, a major issue, and in the discussion again after a spate of mass shootings, including El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio. And after these shootings, the president seemed keen on tougher background checks, saying the country needed them. So I want to bring in Jordan Phelps at the White House to discuss this. Jordan, why the change now? Before he said we needed them, and now he's saying no universal background checks.
Kimberly, today the president insists that his position hasn't changed at all on background checks. But as you laid out, it has, in fact, altered from 2 weeks ago when he said we need to do something big, something strong to reform background checks in this country. And now he's saying that we already have strong background checks. Now, Kimberly, what we know is the president had an extended conversation with Wayne LaPierre, the head of the NRA, yesterday. And in that call, our understanding is that the president committed to not doing universal background checks. Now, the president today is saying he didn't commit to doing nothing with Wayne LaPierre. In fact, he says that LaPierre agrees that something has to be done in some way. But what the president is really saying now is a much more trimmed down version of what he was saying 2 weeks ago. He's saying that we need to work around the edges and make some kind of minor changes to the background checks that already exist to make them more enforced. So the president wants to kind of make some minor changes. We're not going to see a big major overhaul on background checks as the president is now signaling. So the president really here trying to explain that shift and make it seem like there's been no shift at all.
There has been a shift, but I want to also talk about what he said about mental health, because he said that, you know, he doesn't want guns in the hands of people that are mentally unstable. So it's back to a mental health issue.
Absolutely. And this is kind of where the president is more consistently. It was more of an anomaly to hear the president talking about making dramatic changes to background checks, talking about the mental health aspect of this, talking about that slippery slope, the concerns he has about doing something to the background check laws that then he says Democrats will want to take things along much further. Those are really NRA talking points and much more in line with the president's strong Second Amendment supporting base. So the president very much back where he started, it would seem, Kimberly.
And Jordan, are they looking, the administration, they're looking into some sort of age-related change now?
Doesn't sound like there's anything specific that they're looking to do right there, Kimberly. You'll remember after Parkland, the president was supportive of making some changes to ages around gun ownership, but we're really lacking a lot of specificity from the White House at this point on what they're looking to do. And of course, Capitol Hill very much needs the leadership of this president to send clear signals about what he's willing to do, how far he wants to take this. And right now, they just don't have that.
Yes, a major issue. And while you're with us, I want to talk to you about another controversy. Lots of comments on Representative Tlaib and Representative Omar in regards to Israel. And the president made some comments about the Jewish community today. So let's take a listen to that.
In my opinion, you vote for a Democrat, you're being very disloyal to Jewish people, and you're being very disloyal to Israel.
Yeah, Jordan, so what are we supposed to make of those comments there?
Kimberly, the president very much doubling down on a statement he made yesterday where he said that any Jewish person who votes for Democrats is either lacking knowledge or that they're disloyal. The president clarifying today that he was saying that they are disloyal to Israel. So the president very much doubling down on what has been criticized as an anti-Semitic trope, this idea that Jewish people have this dual loyalty between Israel and the United States. The president not backing down from that and the criticism only growing.
And Jordan, obviously lots going on. And before you go, I just want to ask you about this meeting that was canceled between the president and the leader of Denmark over the selling of Greenland.
Yeah, last night the president announced that he wouldn't be going to Denmark as planned over the Labor Day weekend. And the reason for that is he said the Danish prime minister had said it was absurd for him to bring up this idea of the U.S. possibly buying Greenland. The president saying today that the reason he did that wasn't so much because they weren't willing to talk, but he says that tone was unacceptable. He says you just don't talk about the United States that way, and he felt it was very disrespectful. Now, Kimberly, it's worth noting that just a few days ago, the president told us that the idea of buying Greenland was just an idea and not something that would be top agenda when he met with the Danish government in a couple of weeks. But that tweet very much revealing that this was much more serious and forefront in the president's mind than he had let on.
All right, Jordan, lots of controversy there. Appreciate all of the updates. Jordan Phillips at the White House. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You know we have kept you updated on the ongoing humanitarian crisis at the border. Lots of controversy and outrage at how separated families and children were being treated in these border detention facilities. And we heard from the acting Secretary of Homeland Security, Kevin McAleenan. So take a listen.
While the Flores settlement agreement is operationally outdated and does not respond to the current immigration crisis, it has many important aspects and principles, like the need for special protections for children and high standards for government facilities, that were adopted as defining features in this new rule. At the heart of this new rule are two core principles: that families should remain together during immigration proceedings, and that conditions for care of children must be appropriate.
All right, so now the Trump administration rolling out a plan for longer-term detention of families traveling with children across the U.S.-Mexico border. So I want to bring in producer Quinn Owen in our D.C. bureau to explain this. Quinn, it's good to see you. Want to ask you, what does this mean exactly?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kimberly. So basically, the government has said here, you heard the acting secretary mention the Flores settlement agreement. They say they now have the fix to this settlement agreement, which has long been the standard for setting the rules and regulations of how to detain a lot of immigrants in detention, especially as it concerns immigrant kids. And the government now says, the secretary is now saying that they have met and exceeded all these standards through this new framework framework that they've created in publishing this new rule. The key here, though, is that they do not set any limits for how long kids can be held in detention. That's what the Flores settlement provided. So in replacing the settlement agreement with this new rule, they have effectively eliminated those detention limits. Previously, the government could only detain kids for a maximum of 20 days, really, and now they will be able to hold kids and families together. If this regulation goes through, they'll be able to hold them together for the duration of their immigration court proceedings.
Yeah, Quinn, I think people will have a lot of questions about this because, as we know, these facilities are already overcrowded. So where are these families going to be going?
That's a big question because right now the capacity for family residential centers that are operated by Immigration and Customs Enforcement is only about 3,000. Customs and Border Protection has released over 130,000 families since March of this year, and that was an effort to really relieve the strain on the border protection system. They just didn't have enough space to keep people. With this new rule, because they're able to now keep families and detain more families for a longer period of time, they're going to need the extra bed space. When I asked the acting secretary earlier today how they were going to do that, he shifted back to Congress and said that Congress has not provided them the bed space, the detention center capacity that they need to really detain as many people as are coming across. Now, the number of families over the past recent months has declined throughout the summer, and they say that when implementing this new rule, it will create an additional deterrent effect for families that might think about crossing, and they expect numbers to continue to decline, but there's no telling if that will happen for sure.
All right, Quinn Owen in our D.C. Bureau with the updates. Thank you so much. And guys, I'm not sure if you saw this story, but this has been going on for a few weeks. Over 150 people fleeing war and violence in Libya were rescued by a humanitarian boat called Open Arms. The boat was legally allowed to enter Italy's territorial waters, but there was a problem. The Italian right-wing interior minister didn't want them there. So what happened? The people, already under much psychological distress, had to stay on the boat and were unable to dock for over 2 weeks. So I don't even know if you can imagine that. But after a long standoff, they were finally let off. So I want to bring in Carlotta Sami. She's a spokesperson for the United Nations High Commissioner of Refugees to discuss this. Carlotta, thanks for being with us today. Just explain to us why these people weren't able to dock in Italy.
Thanks for having me here with you. The decision was based on a recently approved law inspired by the Ministry of Interior. It was indeed a Ministry of Interior decision to prohibit the rescue ship to dock and to get into Italian ports. So basically, there was a standoff that took place for 2 weeks. And this is not a new situation. These kind of standoff incidents are happening since a year. And still, this show and highlights how strong and urgent is the need to reach an agreement among EU states for a predetermined system for disembarkation, because still the Mediterranean, as you said, faces a humanitarian situation, and hundreds of people are fleeing Libya and find themselves in these awful conditions.
Yeah, and before we go, can you just describe the conditions that the people were under on the boat, because they're already coming from this violence and then them having to stay on this ship for that amount of time? What was it like?
Right. The conditions were described by the rescuers as awful, untenable. But I would like to use the words of the judges that in a way solved the situation by deciding for the immediate evacuation of the remaining 95 persons on board last night. He described this as people perceiving being close to death and a psychopathological situation of neurotic and psychotic dissociation. I mean, the situation was really extreme. These are victims of tortures, of abuses that they suffered sometimes for years in Libyan smugglers' hangars or in detention centers.
All right, so we're happy to learn that they're finally off of this ship, and we hope that they will be okay. That's Carlotta Sami. Thank you for joining us again with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Thank you for being with us. And guys, we turn to another crisis in Kashmir, a disputed territory between India and Pakistan, where the Indian government abruptly revoked the special status of Kashmir that had been in place for 70 years, status that gave the disputed territory its own constitution and its own autonomy. And leading up to this move, India sent in troops, imposed a curfew, and shut down the internet and cell service. And as you can imagine, the tensions are high. So I want to bring in Sana Beg. She's one of my Kashmiri friends who was there when this happened and just recently returned to Delhi. Sana, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Good to hear from you. What was it like for you and your family when all of this went down?
Thanks for having me. Well, honestly, there was a bit of an ominous feeling. We heard low-flying planes and choppers in civilian areas, which is unusual. This is right before this happened. And there was rhetoric in the news about possible escalation of tensions between India and Pakistan. And then right away, the internet stopped, phones started working, and where I was staying, there was no electricity either. So we had no idea what was going on until the next morning when only the electricity came back. We turned on the TV to essentially hear of India pulling the rug from under the feet of the Kashmiri people, doing as what you mentioned, revoking the authenticity of the 70-year-old agreement that gave Kashmir special status and autonomy. And as instantly as that happened, we had no way of expressing, any Kashmiri civilian had no way of expressing dissent or disagreement to this agreement. They were on the receiving end of receiving news about the future of their own state. There has been a heavy armed presence in all civilian areas. Everyone is essentially under house arrest. There are severe restrictions on movement. As you mentioned, landlines, cell phones, internet continue to be blocked, and there is no freedom of press. And that has been the situation now since about the night of August 4th.
And so now you're back in Delhi. Have you been able to hear from your family? Because I understand that lots of people have been detained as well.
That's correct. That is what we're hearing at the moment as well. In terms of speaking to my family, there has been extremely limited access. The Indian government has restored landlines only in some parts of the capital city in Srinagar. That's not where my family lives, and a lot of the populations that don't live in the city still have zero access to phones. So the only way I have been able to get in touch with my phone is with my parents, is if they've been able to go through the army checkpoints, reach the capital city, call from somebody's phone, and then just to say that they're okay, and then they disappear again when they go back to their hometowns.
And Sana, before we leave, I just want you to give us what people should understand about this situation. Like, what should people be focusing on?
This is the world's most militarized region that falls under the world's largest democracy. And I think what's important for people to know is that the world's largest democracy is currently violating the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is violating several articles of it, including freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of movement. None of that is a granted thing currently in this state. The Indian government has created a culture of fear, a complete communications blackout, no access to the media, and this has essentially become a black hole. So I think now more than ever, there needs to be global pressure from countries with a conscience to hold the Indian leadership accountable, because the people themselves that are living through this don't have a voice of their own. They're being gagged, and so somebody needs to speak up for them.
All right, Sana Beg, right there in New Delhi. Thank you for joining us today. We hope your family and everyone else is safe. Thank you. And guys, we move on. Lots of heavy news today, but we're going to end on something a little bit light. I'm here with Will Reeve because there's an event in Nevada next month dubbed Storm Area 51. And lots of people are expected to show up for some other festivals. And the county officials are worried, we hear. So much so that they've declared an emergency declarations in place just in case something goes down. So, Will, what is happening?
Well, just as a refresher for the couple people who might not know what Area 51 is, it's a military base in Nevada, about 80 miles outside of Las Vegas. We're not exactly sure what happens there. We only were told of its existence, confirmed existence by the U.S. government like 6 years ago, but evidence suggests it's where they test military experimental airplanes, and there have been conspiracy theories for years that there are aliens, that there's research about UFOs, and there are maybe UFOs on the site, and it's just got this place in popular culture. Maybe you've seen Independence Day.
Yes.
All that. So I think that what's really going to be funny is if all these people show up. They've had this event planned for months that this guy who was playing video games just made up, and he was like, all right, I'm going to see if we can all storm Area 51. And 2 million people signed up to this event, this thing. He insists it's a joke, which is a good thing because the FBI actually came to his door and made sure, as he said, that he wasn't a terrorist making pipe bombs. He insists it's all a joke. He has a disclaimer up on the Facebook page. They've shifted the concept of the idea to now just be a festival. They're calling it Alien Stock, and then there's another one called UFOlogy Expo.
Okay, so these festivals were created in response. They weren't going on before.
No, they're basically like, okay, no, we're not actually going to storm Area 51, but since everyone seems to be interested, let's all go there anyway. So that is the reason for this emergency declaration, because this is rural Nevada. It's a tiny place, really remote, not much resources there for the local officials to handle possibly tens of thousands of people actually coming to this tiny area. So they're just making sure that they have everything in place should anyone show up looking to check out Area 51. The U.S. military, the U.S. Air Force specifically, has said, don't even think about it. Do not show up and try to get on to the military base, because it is a military base and you will be treated as an intruder.
My only question for you, Will, is if you have planned to go, because I know you get these crazy assignments. You're with the royal baby. You're all over the world. Are you going to Area 51? Are you going to this event?
I hope so. I mean, I'm not going as a UFO enthusiast, nor am I a conspiracy theorist, but I would definitely go as a journalist if ABC wants to send me. I'm happy to go. Yeah, bosses, wherever you are. I will definitely go, and I will report for the debrief and for anyone else who might want to check out what's going on at Area 51 in just a
We
month.
appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
You're always giving us the goods.
I'm always game, you know?
All right, guys, continue to take care of yourselves. And if you're around, you can stick around for the briefing room at 3:30 p.m. And then you can check out World News Prime at 8 p.m. And if you want to stay updated on all of these headlines, you can go to abcnews.com or download the app. Right, Will?
Absolutely. You got it.
We'll see you tomorrow.
That's how it goes.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.